Who is sending military aid to Russia? That is the question to discuss with John Edward Herbst, Director for Eurasia Center in the Atlantic Council of the U.S. and former United States Ambassador to Ukraine. Nice to see you again.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So Russia is trying to buy weapons anywhere for the war in Ukraine. Among other things, there are talkings about Southeast Asian countries like Myanmar. This is stated by the Ukrainian intelligence. So, will Russia be able to draw Myanmar into war against Ukraine?
The short answer is I don't know. The larger answer is Myanmar willing to accept serious sanctions for sending weapons to Russia, is the question.
What kind of sanctions are we talking about?
There are punishing sanctions relating to Myanmar participating in the international economy, in the global economy.
Yeah, I see. Okay. So, and what does the Kremlin offer these countries in exchange, like Myanmar?
Presumably money. Maybe promises of help of some kind beyond money. I'm not sure.
Okay, and what can the collective West offer to those countries instead those countries that still hesitate to support Russia?
Look,
except sanctions.
There are countries which are already considered rogue actors on the international scene, like Iran.
Yep.
So Iran doesn't face much in the way of additional punishment by sending weapons to Russia. But for countries which are not considered rogue nations, which are not already under sanctions, the sanctions regime is a very good reason for them not to help Russia conduct this war. And I think it's been effective in that respect.
So punishment is the best deal?
Well, it's not that it's the best deal, it's just that it seems to work. It's not foolproof, but it seems to work.
Yeah, okay. You've probably heard that the Ukrainian military shot down a Chinese drone in eastern Ukraine. So how should the Allies react to this? And can we assume that Beijing has entered the war against Ukraine by sending the drones?
Well, first, I would distinguish between providing weapons and entering the war. Because the United States does not consider itself at war with Russia, even though it's sending substantial arms to Ukraine. This report about the drone from China with, in fact, American equipments, with American components, is very interesting. And I suspect that the U.S. government's going to pay very close attention to it and try and figure out what exactly happened.
Mm-hmm. What ways of ending the war in Ukraine are on the agenda in the diplomatic environment? As a diplomat, how do you see the end of the war in Ukraine? Is this a complete victory for Kyiv and the restoration of control over the territory that was captured by the February 24th last year, or some kind of relinquishment of some part of the territories?
I mean, we simply don't know. We know that Ukraine's position is it wants all of its territory back. We know that the United States and the NATO and the EU and other nations that are partners with the U.S. support that Ukrainian position. Mm-hmm. We know as well that Ukraine ultimately will make a decision regarding what it must do, what it will do as it conducts this war. So the exact parameters of the settlement, we can't say. But what we can say is that for this war to end successfully, Putin has to give up his desire to conquer Ukraine, to control it politically, and to control and conquer, control politically or conquer nations beyond Ukraine. That's the American stake, to make sure that Putin's revanchist foreign policy is defeated.
And what is more important for the West now? Ukraine's victory on the battlefield or on the anti-corruption front?
You know, I think that Ukrainians understand that if they want to live as Ukrainians in Ukraine, in freedom, they have to win this war. So this is clearly the most important goal right now. It doesn't mean that Ukrainians cannot address other issues, make progress towards other goals, but without a doubt, the most important goal is defeating the Russians in Ukraine.
What do you mean by defeating Russians in Ukraine?
Well, Putin's objective, again, is to establish effective political control, at least in all of Ukraine east of the Dnipro. And it's very much in Ukraine's interest, in Ukrainians' interest collectively, to stop that, to defeat that, and to establish full control, full sovereignty in Ukraine within defensible and economically viable borders. I think everyone pretty much understands that.
Yeah. Do you personally believe that Ukraine can win this war till the end of 2023? Because we heard lots of different thoughts from different experts about this question.
I think if the United States and its allies sent Ukraine everything it needs, Ukraine would decisively defeat the Russians in the south, at a minimum, cut off Crimea so it cannot be supplied except by water. In other words, they would cut the land bridge from Russia through Donbass to Crimea. They could take out this Kerch bridge, and Russia would be reduced to supplying its military and, for that matter, civilians in Crimea by water, which would be very difficult and very expensive, and would make Russian control over Crimea very much in doubt.
But, okay, let's assume that Ukraine has liberated the Crimea. Will this stop Putin? Because we've heard that they're trying to make a new step in mobilizing more than 400,000 people into the Russian army. They are trying to make new deals about the supplyment of different weapons from other allies, so-called allies. Will that can stop Putin? First,
what I've said would make Russian control in Crimea very difficult. I did not say it would liberate Crimea, although eventually I think it would lead to that. Putin has several large problems. Or rather, he has one huge problem, and then there are components to that huge problem. The huge problem is that he is not able, militarily, to achieve his objective of politically controlling Ukraine, yet he's refusing to give up that objective. One of the reasons he cannot do that is his army is corrupt and incompetent. A second reason is, despite the massive Kremlin propaganda, absolutely massive and vile, the Russian people do not believe they are engaged in a war for the survival of Russia. They do not consider Ukraine to be Germany in the 1940s, which is why hundreds of thousands of Russians have left Russia, and hundreds of thousands of Russian draft-age men left Russia when they began that quote-unquote partial mobilization last fall. So he does not have the manpower, and partly thanks to sanctions, partly thanks to Western military support to Ukraine, and partly thanks to Ukrainian military prowess, he does not have the conventional military hardware to conquer Ukraine. Yet he refuses so far to change his objectives. Eventually, again, if American support continues at its current rate and Allied support continues at its present rate, Putin will lose his war in Ukraine. If we gave Ukraine, if we were stronger and bolder in giving Ukraine all the weapons it's asking for right now, that defeat for Putin could come this year. But sadly, the Biden administration remains too cautious, too timid in sending those weapons.
Thank you. Thank you one more time for being the guest of Spotlight Ukraine. And have a good one. Thank you. John Edward Herbst, the director for the Eurasia Center in the Atlantic Council of the U.S. and former United States ambassador to Ukraine, was the guest of our program. Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Latest news, trends, and analytics on all about Ukraine. Like, share, and subscribe. Any questions, proposals, and comments, contact us via email.